And we will now resume our introduction to our audited financial statements. And presenting tonight is our auditing firm, Manor Custarian. Is that how you say it?
Close. Manor Custarian.
Okay, I'll let you repeat that again.
Right.
But thank you for being here and presenting tonight. I'll let you take it away.
I'm just simply introducing Aaron Stevens of Manor Custarian. He will be going over the financial statements as well as findings and everything else with regard to the year-end annual audit.
Thank you. A couple of general comments before I get started. Our thanks to Phil, Michelle, and the rest of the finance team, as well as everyone at City Hall for their courtesy, cooperation, and assistance. We know that we're a disruption to the process and the routine, and we do appreciate all the help that we received while we were here out in the field. I do have the slideshow presentation up on the screen, but also I passed out a hard copy of the slides as well as the thicker financial statement report and then the thinner single audit or the federal compliance audit. I did not duplicate the financial statements in the presentation, so I find that most people that aren't used to reading financial statements don't really enjoy reading financial statements. So they are not included in the presentation. What I plan to do is highlight what I think are the key areas. We'll touch on the independent auditor's report. I've got a few paragraphs from that independent auditor's report that are included here. We'll briefly talk about the government-wide financial statements. We'll highlight the general fund as the governmental fund financial statements, or as part of the governmental fund financial statements. And then we'll talk about the proprietary funds or the enterprise funds. And then we'll look ahead to upcoming accounting pronouncements and what we all have to look forward to there. So with that, the independent auditor's report is on pages 1 through 3 of the thicker bound document. The purpose or the objective of an audit is to express opinions on the financial statements. The purpose of an audit is not to detect fraud or give you an opinion on your internal controls. That is because fraud detection, deterrence, and prevention, as well as sound internal control, are management responsibilities. Now, if we find fraud or if we have recommendations on how to improve your internal control, we certainly have a responsibility to communicate that to you, and that would be done in written form. But that's not the purpose of the audit. That's a byproduct of the audit, is that report on internal control. And so I have included a few paragraphs, as I said, of the independent auditor's report. And for this year's audit, we had a new auditing standard. We had several new auditing standards that had to be implemented, and the one in particular rearranged the order of the paragraphs of the independent auditor's report. We used to bury the opinions on the second page and the third paragraph. Now they're the first two paragraphs of the report. So page 1 of the independent auditor's report, first two paragraphs. The first paragraph simply says that we performed your audit. The second one includes our opinions, and it reads, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. I've highlighted that phrase because that is the important phrase. That is what we refer to as an unmodified opinion. To put that into some perspective, we could express three types of opinions. You have the unmodified or the clean opinion on all of your opinion units. That's what you want to see. That's the highest level of assurance that we can express for a set of financial statements. But we could have expressed a qualified opinion, and that might read something like, except for capital assets, the financial statements are fairly presented. We could have expressed an adverse opinion where the financial statements are not fairly presented. The only other alternative that we have as auditors would be to disclaim an opinion altogether. We just simply couldn't audit your records. So of the options, you do have the highest level of assurance that we can provide, and that is what you want to see as a council. That's what you're looking for, those unmodified opinions. In the fourth paragraph on page 1, we highlight that management is responsible for the preparation and the fair presentation of the financial statements. These financial statements are the city's. They are not ours. They're the city's. The only thing in this report that's ours is the opinions, the independent auditor's report. So management is responsible for that preparation and fair presentation, as well as the internal control over the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements. Our responsibility is to express opinions, but our objectives are to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatement. So this paragraph or this section was expanded by the new auditing standard. I've highlighted reasonable assurance because it is not absolute assurance. We select sample sizes, we We pick specific transactions. We don't look at every single transaction that runs through the city. So it's reasonable assurance about whether or not the financial statements are free from material misstatement and not all misstatement. So just to highlight our responsibilities there. Now, the next slide, the government-wide financial statements are presented on pages 12 and 13 and consist of the statement of net position and the statement of activities. Again, I did not duplicate those statements here. Government-wide financial statements are prepared on the full accrual basis of accounting, which means they primarily have a long-term perspective, but they're prepared once a year. The only time you see government-wide financial statements are in this audit report. My presentation is going to focus primarily on the fund level financial statements rather than the government-wide financial statements. But I do have a few metrics that I wanted to point out. For governmental activities, you do have strong liquidity as of June 30th. You had a current ratio of 3.3, so you can cover your current obligations more than 3 times over with your current assets. Unrestricted net position for the governmental activities is negative. It is negative because of the amount of long-term debt, the net pension liability, and the net other post-employment benefits liability that total more than $78 million in long-term obligations. The general employee retirement system pension is well funded at 358%. Police and fire pension is funded at 75%. The OPEB or other post-employment benefits plan is funded at 43%. Total net position for the year did decrease by approximately $4 million for the year ended June 30th, 2022. Business type activities, total net position decreased by $928,000 for this fiscal year that we audited. The information that is included as business type activities is the same information that is included in the enterprise funds. It's a different format. It's rolled up for the government-wide statements. So I'm going to get into more detail when we talk about the fund level enterprise funds. The governmental fund financial statements are presented on pages 14 and 16 of the bound document, and governmental funds financial statements are prepared on the modified accrual basis of accounting. So what that means is there's a current financial resources focus. And so when you look at the balance sheet that's presented on page 14, you won't see those long-term items such as the capital assets, the long-term debt, the net pension liability, and the net OPEB liability, because those are longer-term items that you see on the government-wide statements, but you don't see them in the governmental funds. And the reason you don't see them in the governmental funds is that when a capital asset is purchased, it just shows up as an expenditure in the governmental fund. Similarly, with long-term debt, when the debt payment is made, it's an expenditure. It's not on the balance sheet. This should be a more familiar presentation for you because this is the level at which your budgets are prepared, and the reporting that you get throughout the year is done at the fund level. So this slide here, governmental funds balance sheet, again, is on page 14. This is a snapshot as of June 30th, 2022 of your governmental fund assets, liabilities, deferred inflows of resources, and the net of those three things would be your fund balance. I tend to focus on the general fund as the operating fund for the city. So the general fund's total fund balance was $6.6 million as of June 30th, 2022. That $6.6 million is broken down into 5 classifications. As you can see in the center of the slide there, non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. And when I look at how healthy a governmental fund is, I consider the unassigned and the assigned portions of fund balance, because you can assign fund balance at will. You can do it with a budget amendment. It is still available for use. It's just, it has an intended use when it's been assigned. So as of June 30th, your general fund had about $9,800 of assigned fund balance and $5.5 million of unassigned fund balance. So collectively, I refer to that as unrestricted fund balance, and you have $5.5 million of unrestricted fund balance compared to your expenditures and your other financing uses or transfers out to other funds. That $5.5 million represents approximately 23% of your annual expenditures. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends that you maintain a minimum fund balance in your general fund that is equal to 2 months of what they call normal operations. 2 out of 12 months is about 17%, and you are, as of June 30th, sitting at 23%. So your general fund is healthy, it's in stable condition. That 17% by no means is a maximum, it is a minimum. So at 23%, you're able to meet your obligations as they come due. So on the operating statement for the general fund, sticking with the general fund theme here, total revenues $22 million. That was a decrease from 2021 of about 618,000. So it's about a 3% decrease in revenues for the year. Total expenditures at almost $24 million. That was an increase of about 10%. Approximately 1.4 million of the increase was related to the fire department, new hires, overtime hours, and increased pension expenditures. The balance of the increase is about a 3% increase for the general fund. The net other financing sources and uses actually added $1.3 million to your fund balance, but the results of all of that, your revenues, expenditures, and your other financing sources, you had a net change in fund balance of $226,000 that you used, so a decrease in the general fund balance. To give you a visual perspective, again, I didn't include the financial statements themselves, but here's a bar graph of the last 5 years for the general fund. In the first 4 years of this graph, revenues equaled expenditures. So fund balance did not change from 2018 through 2021, and then it did decrease slightly in 2022. But again, sound financial condition for the general fund. In terms of composition of your revenue, taxes at 51%, that's the same as it was last year. Intergovernmental is at 19%. That was 26% in 2021. But in 2021, you had COVID relief funding it wasn't a repeat revenue, so that did decrease a little bit. Other sources at 11%, that includes insurance rebates recognized. Relatively speaking, I mean, your property tax is still at 51%, so the composition was pretty consistent. On the expenditure side for the general fund, public safety at 57%. In 2021, it was 49%. Again, increased expenditures related to the fire department. General government at 19%, that was 25%. So a little bit of a shift in the composition of the expenditures, but otherwise, other than those two items shifting from general government to public safety, the other percentages remained fairly consistent. This is a line graph of the five-year line graph of the fund balance compared to the expenditures and other financing uses. It's relatively stable. Again, it ended in 2022 at about 23%, keeping in mind that the recommended minimum is 17%. You've exceeded that in each of the past 5 years. This is the same information just in terms of dollars instead of percentages. That brownish orange line is the 17% of your expenditures and other financing uses for the 5-year period. The blue line is the actual dollars. All right. The proprietary funds financial statements are presented on pages 18 through 20. Still full accrual basis of accounting, just like the government-wide financial statements. So it's the same information that was reported under the business type activities of the government-wide financial statements, but in more detail. It's broken down by fund, and as I said earlier, a slightly different format. So we're going to talk about the water and sewer fund first. So once again, this is a snapshot as of June 30th, 2022. In this case, you have assets, deferred outflows of resources, liabilities, deferred inflows of resources, and the net of those 4 items would be your net position or your equity for the water and sewer fund. So total net position as of June 30th was $25 million. For enterprise funds, proprietary funds, that net position or equity can be broken down into 3 possible classifications here. So you've got the amounts that's invested in capital assets, net of any related debt. You've got amounts that are restricted, and then whatever is left over would be your unrestricted net position. So in this case, I take the operating expenses, I take your unrestricted net position and compare it to your operating expenses, but I back out or subtract out the depreciation expense because depreciation is a non-cash expense. So when you work through that calculation, it comes out to 1.7 months of operations that you have in your water and sewer fund. But because these are full accrual financial statements for enterprise funds and not modified accrual general fund, we can't really use the same metrics or the same benchmark at 17% or 2 months worth of operations because there's more to it than that. You can start with that 2 to 3 months of operations as a baseline, but then you have to factor in any debt service requirements that you have in the upcoming year, as well as your capital needs. And that is the most subjective part of the whole calculation in terms of a recommendation. So, because it's your system. So what condition is your water system in? What condition is your sewer system in? Do they need to be replaced? Is there a lot of repair and maintenance? To the extent that the answers to those questions are yes, you want to have a higher unrestricted net position so you can prepare for those expenses as they come up. I would say, generally speaking, 1.7 months is fairly low for an enterprise fund, for a water and sewer fund. But it's positive. This is a bar graph of the revenues, expenses, and total net position for each of the past 5 years for the water and sewer fund. And you might look at that and go, well, we're really healthy. That total net position is pretty high. It is, but you can't spend your systems. So that green bar does include your investment in capital assets, net of any related debt. When you break your net position down into the three categories, your net investment in capital assets was about $23 million. That's the green portion of this bar graph. You've got another 1.2 that is restricted because of debt covenants and so forth. So what you have available is about $1.2 million for operations. And it's been on a downward trend over the past 5 years. That percentage of unrestricted net position compared to operating expenses has been declining. But this, one comment here, this downward trend, it is a downward trend, but it is expected to rebound in 2023 when the new rates take effect. So we expect to see that kind of loop back up for next year. In terms of the auto parking fund, again, snapshot as of June 30th, the total net position in the parking fund, auto parking fund, was about $1.8 million. Same three classifications here for this fund. In this case, your unrestricted net position is negative. It's a negative $2.5 million. So again, when you want to look at the recommended net position, obviously it's not going to be negative. You want it to be positive, and you still have to factor in operations, debt service, and capital needs. So once again, a similar bar graph here of total revenues, total expenses, and total net position. You might look at this and think, well, it's okay. The net position is it's positive. It looks like it's healthy. But when you break it down into its components, you don't happen to have any restricted net position here, but your net investment in capital is $4.3 million. Your unrestricted is a negative $2.5. So the pandemic was not kind to the auto parking fund. This is the 5-year trend, and you can see, when people stopped driving downtown and parking, it took a dip in terms of the percentage of unrestricted net position compared to expenses. Upcoming accounting pronouncements, we do have a note disclosure in the thicker report on page 63. It's note 17. We've included 3 of the upcoming accounting pronouncements here. A description of those is included in the report. GASB 96, subscription-based information technology arrangements, or SBITAs. That is, it's very much like GASB 87 on leases, which was effective for the audit that we just finished. GASB 96 is, in effect, the leasing of software. So you're going to the extent you have these software leases that need to be recognized, you would record a right-to-use asset on your statement of net position, as well as the lease payable in your long-term obligations. So this is a government-wide financial statements, has a government-wide financial statement effect, as well as proprietary funds. GASB 100 on accounting changes and error corrections, more disclosure related to those, and more definition about what an accounting change or error is, and that is. Well, GASB 96 is effective at the end of this fiscal year that you're in now, so 2023. GASB 100 is effective in 2024. And GASB 101 on compensated absences is effective in 2025. So I sometimes joke that this is the Auditor Employment Act section of my presentation, because this will keep us all busy for the next few years. Now, I don't have slides on it, but I did want to talk just a little bit about the supplementary information to the financial statements, that thinner report. Because the city expended $1,847,200 of federal awards, you were required to have what we refer to as a single audit, or an audit performed in accordance with the uniform guidance. The threshold for that audit is $750,000, so you were well above that. And the major program that was selected for testing was the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Page 9 of that thinner report does include a summary of the auditor's results. For the financial statement audit, we do have comments or findings that we consider to be material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, and non-compliance. For the audit of the federal awards, there were no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and no other findings required to be reported. We did express an unmodified opinion on the compliance with the major federal program requirements. So again, that's a clean opinion. That's what you want to see, is that unmodified opinion on the major federal programs compliance requirements. So the findings are included in that thinner report, but also included in the thinner report are management's responses to each of those findings. So I wasn't planning on going through those in great detail, but I would be happy to answer any questions you may have about the findings or anything else that I went through, because I know I went through that pretty quickly. So happy to answer any questions.
I will open up to council to ask questions. And thank you for your presentation. If I may, I had a question from page 63 on the upcoming accounting pronouncements, specifically the last sentence of the second paragraph. The city is currently evaluating the impact the standard will have on the financial statements when adopted during the 2023-2024 fiscal year. Are we expecting a change? Or trying to figure out how to incorporate it? What is that? Can you explain this a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it's boilerplate language, to be honest with you. It says it after each one of these
Okay.
but it's just, really, it's just informational. These statements, these accounting statements will need to be implemented, and we will, as the auditors, work with the city on implementing them.
Okay.
For that specific change, it's going to be largely no disclosure enhancements, and it won't significantly change the reporting. And it's only if you have an error correction. So to the extent you don't have any restatements of fund balance or net position, it won't have any impact. So.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mayor, what page were you on?
I was on page 63.
Okay, thank you.
I want to make sure. We are getting the full report tonight, so we're reviewing certain pages that we haven't seen before, which is why we might be a little quieter than.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
I know that at our last audit, the city made some corrections and we put in mid-year a budget amendment adjustments, which we've already gone through. So when is the next one expected?
Through the chair, February 13th is the
February
second
13th.
quarterly adjustment.
Yeah. So we have those controls in place now.
At the very end of that thinner report, we actually have a status of prior year findings as well. So there's a schedule that includes the findings we had last year and where the city's at with those at the end of June.
Through the chair. So that kind of brings me to 2022-004, unfavorable budget variances.
What page, please?
Page 11 of the thinner report?
On the thinner report, on the federal?
Yeah, well, this is the one that has all the findings. So the way I understood that is that we actually have the same problem this year as we did last year.
It's similar, yes. There is.
Where is that?
In
Page 13, or page 11?
Right, but in the thicker report, on page 76, we detail out those budget variances that we're referring to.
I'm sorry, page 76?
76, yes. in the larger context of the general fund budget, you can see those same variances on pages 65 and 66. See both positive and or favorable and unfavorable budget variances on 65 and 66.
Okay.
So the overall budget was to have revenues equal expenditures. And the actual net change in fund balance was a use of $226,000.
And it was just those two instances?
There were 3 in the general fund.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One of them was not material, at $46,
Okay.
but.
Okay, and then my other question is, it was something that you stated, I think early on. You had said that the increase in expenses was due predominantly to the fire department increase in,
Increased number of positions, overtime, and pension costs.
pension costs. So it was all employment related?
Yes.
Okay. I just kind of want to get that out there that, people that claim we're just throwing money at, all, pet projects and things. That's not what is pushing us over budget. That's all I have, Mayor.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to add on that the history of this, we also had a changeover last year of finance directors, and we really appreciate your due diligence in helping bring the city up to compliance. So I think that changeover in directorship caused some challenges, which were adequately addressed, talked about openly earlier this year.
Yeah, through the chair, the quarterly budget adjustments were incorporated towards the end of the year in response to the audit in February. So this will be the first full year that we'll have 4 quarterly budget adjustments pre-scheduled and executed. So I expect the variances to be addressed through Phil's policies.
Yep. And we're working through a whole cycle of that, because that takes a year to work through.
The lag, yeah.
Yep. Yep. Are there other questions from council members at this time? All right, thank you so much for your presentation. We would need a motion to accept the audited financial statements in order to proceed and conclude the presentation.
I motion that council receive and file the final audited financial statements following the conclusion of the 2022 City of Ferndale audit as submitted by the finance director.
Second. Moved by Polika and second by Mayor Pro Tem James.
Polika,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Leaks May,
Yes.
Mikulski,
Yes.
Piana.
Yes. All right, that concludes our presentation, and now I'm going to move to call to audience, and we do provide 30 minutes typically for call to audience, but we have another meeting at 7, but I know there's folks in here who would like to provide comment tonight. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and I invite you up to the podium so we can hear what you have to say, and thank you for coming out tonight. And who is minding the clock? I'll do it on my phone.
Kara was, but I think she stepped up.
Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Dave Quartz. I live at 2128 East 10 Mile Road. And I'm here about the Airbnb that I live right next door to. That just had a drive-by shooting. The house was hit 15 times. I had a gentleman in my backyard, and the police officer actually found a gun in my backyard. I believe the Airbnb should not be there. I've lived in the city for 26 years. I've been here actually my whole life since the 3rd grade. I bought the house for my mom and dad. Never had any type of problem like this in our neighborhood at all, until the Airbnb showed up. Now that it's there, constantly. The police have been there numerous times, and I've had people threaten me next door that have been renting this house. I believe the Airbnb should not be allowed in the city of Ferndale. I know there's more incidents that's happened with more Airbnbs in the city. There's been other shootings, drive-by shootings. It's happened in Royal Oak. It's happened in Hazel Park. I think they need to be gone. We need to pull this Airbnb from our area. I've talked to several of my neighbors. I actually have two of them here with me now. And they all agree that there should not be an Airbnb in the residents of Ferndale. And especially what happened, I have a 7-month-old great-granddaughter that lives with me. The one out there that happened to her. Or being upset by it. I was sitting in my house when the gunfire happened. I seen the flashes of the muzzle out my front window. And like I said, I've lived here 26 years, and they've lived here longer than I have. That's my opinion. I don't know if it goes over, but I think it should. Thank you.
Thank you for coming and letting us know.
Hi, my name's Tom Limbaugh. I live at 3370 Edgeworth. I'm just a few doors the other direction from these neighbors, just west of the house in question. My feeling too is this house needs to be gone. It's been a problem for a while, really since they started as an Airbnb. It's not a vacation rental. It's not an overnight quaint little place to stay. They have large groups of people and parties there constantly. I did talk to someone from City Hall tonight who was nice enough to fill me in on some information that needs things that we would have to consider to legally close this place down as an Airbnb, because the city, apparently if there's 3 verifiable instances of them violating, violations with this house, and by my count, there's already 2 recently in the last year, because I think there was a garbage violation that was called in on them. And this incident the other night, I found very little online. My daughter just texted me with the first news article we've been able to find online about this. And according to the police report, or at least what the report online was that there were 8 occupants at the time, which according to the person I talked to at City Hall is already a violation of how many people can be. I think it's like a 1 or 2 bedroom house. 2 bedrooms. Yeah, sometimes there's 8 cars out there. And one weekend, and I would really like to call this house to the attention of the police department. It is time to really start paying attention to this house, because there was one weekend in the summer that every window in that house had been blacked out by who was staying there, put black plastic over the windows. I don't think I have to tell anybody in this room what kind of ugly nonsense was going on in that house, or could have been potentially going on. No one rents an Airbnb and then blacks out every room in the house. There is illegal, illicit activity going on in this house. It's routine now. It's happening all the time. And this incident the other night, this will not stand. As residents in the neighborhood, there's only a few of us here. There's more because there was a short turnaround for us to get here for this meeting only a few days after this happened. But there's plenty of other residents who are not going to tolerate this anymore. And we're going to ask the city to really take steps to shut this place down. It needs to go. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for letting us know what's sharing your frustration. I hear your frustration, and we put in the short-term rental during the pandemic of 2020 and 2021 with residents who guided this, and we will enforce that ordinance here and make sure that the city follows up. As an aside, but related, at the time that the short-term rental ordinance was passed in Ferndale, there was significant House bills and Senate bills to remove local control from short-term rental bills. And I have a feeling, though I cannot confirm, those threats of removing local control most likely will go away in the next upcoming legislative session. So, which is a good thing, because cities were always fighting against being able to continue to have an ordinance to monitor Airbnbs. And the city has decided at this time to allow Airbnbs because there was state law saying that they would ban cities from banning Airbnbs. So we will continue to monitor legislation in the 2020 year, but at this time, our ordinance is the best boundaries to provide to bad actor short-term rental owners. So I just want to reaffirm the city's police and code enforcement are your best allies at this time. And please have and encourage your residents to call the police if you see any further activity with the Airbnb. Having it on record is the most important thing that the residents can do.
Yeah, thank you. This person that I talked to at City Hall was actually very helpful. Like I said, it was just before I left to come down here, and they kind of helped fill me in on, some of the, I haven't even had a chance to talk to my neighbors about it since then, but, the types of things that have to happen legally for us to, shut them down. But
Yes.
it's definitely a problem, but thank you.
Yes, and the city also, the police department also has to finish their investigation as well. That's part of the process.
Yeah, yep.
So, but thank you for coming in tonight. I appreciate it. All right. And with that, there is no other items on the agenda, and I am closing the first meeting of the night at 6:42. And we will see you back at 7 o'clock. we are. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Monday, December 19th, 7 o'clock City Council meeting. Tonight is a double header. We had a City Council meeting at 6 where we reviewed the financial audit. And to kick off our last meeting of the year, I invite you to participate in a mindfulness moment, which I started almost a year ago for City Council meetings. You don't have to do this, it's not mandatory, but you can sit quietly during the short exercise. So you can close your eyes, or you can look downward, or you can stare intently at the next person next to you. I'm kidding. So bring attention to your breath. Notice how you're breathing right now, how you're sitting. You can find a way to be more relaxed in your posture in your chair. And start to take slower, deeper breaths. We're going to take a few inhales and exhales. Inhale on the count of 4. Exhale on the count of 5. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Give your permission to be present in this meeting. Let go of your busy day. To recognize that we're in a shared community space. Remember to wish yourself well. Wish those around you well. And maybe you're a little bit more present and focused, aware. So with that, I am going to ask you to join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, can we have roll call, please?
James.
Present.
Leaks May.
yes,
Mikulski.
here,
Polika.
Here.
Piana.
Here. Next up is the approval of the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second. Moved by Polika and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem James.
Polika.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Leaks May.
yes,
Mikulski.
Yes.
Piana.
Yes. All right, and tonight we start with presentations, and we have 2. And first up is the Ferndale Environmental Sustainability Commission year-end report. We ask that all commission boards do year-end reports. And, I think we'll be doing more in January and February, but appreciate the FESC being the first one. So I think you can come on down. Join Claire.
Good evening, Council. I am here today to introduce our fabulous Chair and Vice Chair of the Ferndale Environmental Sustainability Commission. I have served as the staff liaison for this commission since October of 2021, and we've just as a group been able to accomplish a lot over that time, so I'm really excited to have them present all of their goals and achievements from this past year for 2022. I will let them introduce themselves and take it away with all of the great information and photos that we have for you tonight.
Thank you, and thank you for volunteering your time to serve on the FESC, and to all the volunteers. We appreciate everything that you do on behalf of the city and this commission.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Popovich. I am the Vice Chair of the Commission,
and we are members of the Ferndale Environmental Sustainability Commission. We meet every first Monday of each month at 6:30, and all are welcome. I don't see any fellow commissioners in the attendance, but we do want to say how grateful we are for the contributions of Mayor Pro Tem Kat James, who serves as the City Council liaison to the Commission. So thank you for your time. We are established per city ordinance to review existing green policies for potential improvements and advise City Council, the Mayor, and city officials on alternative opportunities for practicing sustainability in the community. And before we talk about our 2022 goals, we don't want to forget to mention that this year Ferndale achieved the Michigan's Green Communities Challenge Gold Award. I promise I practiced this. Primarily for what the city actually accomplished in the previous year. And I forgot to do this. And then to talk about our 2022 goals, we said we wanted to draft a welcome to Ferndale package, to provide several recommendations to the city's communications team spanning a broad range of sustainability topics, from composting to recycling to native landscaping, to provide new residents with a resource for finding all the information on the city's green amenities. And it's our understanding that these recommendations will be incorporated into the city's newsletter, as well as the revamp of the new website. As our second goal, we said we would like to launch a community rain barrel educational campaign program, and 2 events actually took place on this, one on Earth Day weekend and one in May, and we'll talk about those as well in just a second. And the third goal was to launch a community education campaign about recycling and composting. And these efforts could not have been done without the dedicated support and leadership of Claire, the City Zero Waste Program Coordinator. So thank you for your time, Claire. When composting launched in the fall of 2021, FESC commissioners volunteered for the compost bucket pickup. There was an overwhelming response from the city's residents. The limit for participants was met after only 48 hours, and we are grateful to the City Council for providing the expansion of the program to more residents. And we look forward to hearing results of the survey that was sent out to participants and discover ways that we can make the benefit of composting accessible to even more residents. And then, through these goals, we established 2 subcommittees just to kind of accelerate the progress between the monthly meetings. And as mentioned, we had the Welcome to Ferndale package info subcommittee, which was spearheaded by Nicole Janowitz, and the Rain Barrel subcommittee was initiated by continues to be led by Jim Janowitz. So basically our power couple. And so for the first goal, the Welcome to Ferndale info packet submitted has been submitted to. Oh my goodness, submitted recommendations. Let me try this again. The Welcome to Ferndale Info Packet Subcommittee has submitted recommendations to the city's communications department, and we are obviously willing to support the implementation in any shape or form that, we are seen fit. For our second goal, the city was awarded a grant from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, also known as EGLE, in the spring of this year to reduce stormwater runoff through the implementation of a citywide rain barrel educational program. The grant allows for the sale of over 400 rain barrels for city residents. The FESC has developed a proposal for a tiered pricing structure to make the cost as accessible for residents of a wide range of household incomes. The rain barrel kits will be sold along with the needed accessories to make for a successful installation and proper use. The Commission will be hosting educational events in 2024 along with the launch of the program. The first program is scheduled to occur on Saturday, April 1st. Announcements are scheduled to be released in the water bills to residents over the next couple of months. 2 rain barrel demonstration events that occurred this year. One was in collaboration with a local business, Walking Lightly, which is located on Hilton, and one at the library. In addition to the educational event, the library hosted a rain barrel educational display on site for several months. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jennifer.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and thank you all. So, moving on to our third goal. Our third goal was to launch a community education campaign about recycling and composting. So we did this by supporting the compost pilot and educating residents through webinars and events. We're also grateful for the collaboration with other city commissions and departments. So we had the opportunity to have an FESC commissioner, she's not here, but Quinn Ziegler served as our representative on both the Plan Ferndale Steering Committee as well as the city's facilities task force. 2023 is around the corner and we're excited. We're already making plans. Our first meeting of the year is in January, and we'll be making our plans for the year. But we, at our meeting a few weeks ago, we developed a survey of commissioners, which we're looking at prioritizing what our goals are by reevaluating our goals from last year and identifying what we want to work on in the year ahead. But we know that we will be hosting the Rain Barrel educational events, including the Rain Barrel discounted sale on April 1st, and exploring how we can make solar more accessible, maybe by a solar race program similar to what Royal Oak is doing. And we want to grow our community. So all are welcome. All our meetings are open, public meetings right here in this room. And although we're at capacity with 9 commissioners per the city ordinance, we really welcome everyone to participate. And, you know, we can't do this without all of the city's participation in making Ferndale the greenest city in the region, which I already think it is, but having everybody know that. Really special shout out to Nicole. She couldn't make it tonight, but she is the photographer and the commissioner who's taking all these amazing photos of our activities and events. And thank you all, and we welcome any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. This is a great presentation and fabulous photography. Nicole has done some photography for the city, particularly for the elections and things like that, and the drive-by, or not drive-by, drive-through ballot drop-off, so during the pandemic. This is fantastic. I really look forward to what you guys bring in 2023, particular solar. I know energy production is part of, looking at part of that in our master plan. Some of those policies coming forward.
Awesome.
Yes, and I know you're the FESC is the right commission to figure this out for us.
Glad to be here. Thank you
so much, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is our second presentation, which is 4B, which is Introduction of Flock, License Plate Recognition Platform for the Detective Bureau. And presenting tonight is Philman.
Good evening, Council. Happy holidays to everyone. Tonight, the Police Department and representatives from FLAC will be introducing the FLAC safety system as an investigative tool for our Detective Bureau. The Ferndale Detective Bureau currently has 4 detectives that are assigned to investigate cases full-time. As you can see by the slide, they have a significant caseload. But keep in mind, these numbers were impacted by COVID. Their cases range from common to critical, varying from larcenies, weapon charges, kidnappings, robberies, and everything in between. The majority of these cases involve the use of a motor vehicle. Recently, solved cases like the kidnapping of an FHS student, the young woman shot in her home on West Bennett, and the robbery of 711 West started with the identification of a vehicle. So vehicle identification is a critical piece of evidence for our detectives to be successful. One of the first things our officers do when they arrive on a crime scene is locate eyewitnesses and video cameras. We prefer video footage because an eyewitness's recall can be imperfect, which hinders an investigation. For decades, we've been soliciting video footage from private businesses and residents to help identify vehicles. But this process can be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Cameras are not always available in the needed area. Systems may be broken or not even recorded. Access to systems may be slowed by password complications, like mine, or corporate security protocols. Videos may be unusable due to poor quality. Detectives must spend long periods of time reviewing videos on multiple systems. As you can see, this is a long and tedious process with a low success rate. The FLAC representatives here tonight will explain the details of what FLAC technology is and is not. But I would like to share a simple analogy with you that explains how I see FLAC. The first thing that comes to mind is our monument at 9 Mile and Woodward, the Crow's Nest. It represents a police officer in a tower overlooking the intersection, acting as an eyewitness to all vehicle traffic. Imagine us having multiple eyewitnesses spread across the city. Eyewitnesses that work 24/7, 365 days a year, that are free of human error like fatigue, distraction, persuasion, or even bias. Eyewitnesses who provide indiscriminate and accurate data about vehicles, not people. And only vehicles traveling on a public street and public view. This information is only shared with detectives and only for verified police cases. Simply put, I see FLAC as an eyewitness multiplier and enhancer for the Ferndale Detective Bureau. There's no information gathered that you or I couldn't get from standing on a street corner watching traffic pass by. About a year ago, detectives brought FLAC to our attention after speaking with their peers in the Hazel Park, Madison Heights, and Southfield police departments. They raved about FLAC's investigative searches and how quickly vehicles were being identified to solve cases. FLAC is not your typical LPR system. It can identify vehicles' make, color, license plate, aftermarket accessories, and damage to be searched in a database for 30 days before being deleted. I understand this type of technology can cause apprehension. The chief and I were also hesitant. That's why we deliberately waited 6 months to vet the technology and the company with other police departments before even approaching the city manager. The chief also crafted a written policy that ensures oversight, transparency, and accountability. It prohibits the use of the system for invasion of privacy, harassment, or personal use, and holds users accountable for any violation, with discipline up to and including termination. It also provides oversight with periodic random audits. After meeting with FLAC, we were even more impressed by their commitment to data security and the protection of individual rights, as their values align with our values. Our research has concluded FLAC is widely used across Michigan and highly celebrated by police departments, community stakeholders, and local governments. We believe it will be a game-changing technology for our detectives, and we want to provide them with the best tools available. We strongly believe this technology will help us reach our goals to provide a safe and protected community. Now I'd like to introduce Laura Ann Holland and Matt Wayne from FLAC for more on FLAC safety.
Thanks so much, Captain Spellman. It's great to be here tonight, Council. As Captain said, I'm Laura Ann Holland, and I do community education for FLOC. Before Matt talks in a little bit more detail about our approach to the automated license plate reader technology, I wanted to take a second to describe our origin story for you guys in hopes that it will explain a little bit about our approach to this technology as neighbors. A lot of this Captain Spellman has already highlighted, but we were actually founded 5 years ago by someone who was himself a victim of property crime. And after sharing camera footage with the police and getting their feedback, he realized that the information that they actually needed in order to solve the crime that was impacting his community was a license plate number. And so he built our very first FLOC device, right? We're several iterations beyond that at this point, but he built that device in order to solve crime in his own neighborhood. And so I share that story with you guys because I think it's important to understand that we're coming at this from that perspective as a neighbor, wanting to keep our neighborhood safe while also maintaining our privacy protections and protecting our other values like transparency and accountability. One last note on this, that I was just doing some research and looking at the Ferndale Police Department's website, and I think it's really important to note that our company's mission and values, eliminating crime and protecting the whole community, really clearly align with the Ferndale Police Department's and your community's mission and values. And I think that's important because we all know that protecting and partnering with diverse communities requires us to listen to different voices, requires us to have input from different perspectives. And we as a company are committed to doing that with our customers through community education and outreach, especially here in Ferndale. So I'll pass it over to Matt so he can talk a little bit more about our approach to the automated license plate reader.
Thanks, Laura Ann, and thanks, Captain Spellman. Good evening. I wanted to introduce myself first. My name is Matt Wayne. I'm the Territory Sales Manager for FLOC Safety for the state of Michigan. Born and raised in the Metro Detroit area. Currently live downriver with my family, but I do have friends and family that live in Ferndale, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Like Captain Spellman and Laura Ann mentioned, and something I wanted to share with you tonight is, as you can see here, that solving crime is very difficult. And these statistics in front of you are from the FBI Unified Crime Report and national averages, where you'll see that 15% is the average clearance rate for property crimes in our country, meaning that 85% of property crimes go unsolved, and 50% is the national average clearance for violent crimes, meaning that 50% of violent crimes currently go unsolved. Another thing that we know is that 70% of crime involves some sort of vehicle. And like Captain Spellman mentioned, with FLOC Safety, this allows law enforcement to search for specific types of vehicle, license plates, characteristics that may be in a certain area of a crime during a certain time period. I wanted to make sure to clearly explain what the technology is versus what it isn't, because we take protecting privacy very seriously at FLOC Safety, and we also want to make sure that we can deliver a tool to our law enforcement partners that can be an effective way to protect our communities and keep them safe. So this technology is license plate recognition. It gathers objective evidence about vehicles, not about people. It alerts the police of wanted vehicles. It's used to solve crime. It adheres to all state laws, and all of the data will be owned and operated by the Ferndale Police Department. What this technology is not, this is not any sort of facial recognition. It's not tied to any type of personally identifiable information or any third-party database. It is specifically photographs, still photographs, of the backs of vehicles. It's not used for any type of traffic enforcement, and the data is kept in the system for 30 days, and then it is automatically deleted. So, like I mentioned, this technology is specifically to solve and deter crime and to keep our communities safer. And we see that there's 3 ways that this technology can be used that way. The first is proactively, the real-time alerts. When a wanted vehicle, potentially an amber alert or a silver alert, enters into your community, the police department will be notified proactively. Also, for investigative purposes, if a crime is committed, the Detective Bureau will be able to go back and search the system for vehicles in that area during that time that may match any video surveillance in the area or an eyewitness testimony to help identify a suspect vehicle. And then lastly, flock cameras can serve as a deterrent to those looking to potentially commit crime in an area.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so anytime we talk about bringing in new technology, of course, it's really important that we have the right policy oversight in place to make sure that it's not misused. And luckily, Ferndale, you guys, a couple years ago, established a municipal surveillance oversight ordinance. And it's really rare for communities to have done this, but I applaud you that you have this ordinance in place. And we can talk more in detail about this, but flock safety and our both intention and our application of our automated license plate reader device comply with your municipal surveillance ordinance. Additionally, like Captain Spellman said, your chief has put together a draft ALPR policy that outlines how the system can and cannot be used in Ferndale, who can use it, under what circumstances, and of course, we can talk in more detail about those policy specifics and questions and answers, but it's really important that this is in place so that you know who you're going to share with, what your data ownership rights look like, and your chief has already tried to outline all of those pieces for you guys. Matt, do you want to say anything else about privacy before we move on?
Just real quick to touch on that, and I mentioned it before, but obviously we do take privacy very seriously, and utilizing this ALPR policy and some of the other systems that we talked about previously really allow us to focus on protecting the privacy of all of our citizens and allowing the law enforcement partners that we have to have an effective tool to, again, keep our community safer. Thank you.
A couple other things that we've tried to build into the system to make sure that this technology is being used effectively and efficiently. We actually provide an ongoing audit portal for your department. So that means every single search that's logged in the system will have a unique identifier that is proactively reported to your chief and to Captain Spellman. And so they can see the searches that were done, under what circumstances, and that allows them to make sure that the system is being used for the right purposes. We also provide a transparency portal that allows you to communicate to your citizens about how the technology is used. I know in the surveillance oversight ordinance, you guys were very clear about wanting there to be, public signage and making sure that your citizens know about the pictures that are being taken of them. And our transparency portal, I think, is a great partner to that because it allows you to be able to report, on the aggregate, what this technology is, how many devices you have, how many images are captured. And so there's a few examples that we can pull up of those transparency portals, but we create that free of charge for anyone who joins the Flock network. Matt's going to talk a little bit more about some case examples so you guys can see what this has actually looked like and how it actually has helped other police departments solve crime, and then we'll pass it back to Captain Spellman for next steps.
So this example here on the screen, unfortunately this was a tragedy that happened in Van Buren Township here in Michigan. A young woman was walking one night on a service drive and a vehicle struck her and killed her and drove off as a hit and run. Luckily, the Van Buren Police Department was a Flock partner. They were able to go to the scene of the crime to find pieces of the vehicle from the crash and identify that the vehicle pieces from that crash were a blue Ford F-150. They then were able to go back into the system to identify which blue Ford F-150s were in that area during that time, to identify a suspect vehicle, then led to a suspect who eventually admitted to committing the crime. And this was a quote from Lieutenant Bazzi of Van Buren Township Police Department talking about how the case would have most likely gone unsolved without the assistance of Flock. Next, this one is out of Illinois, so local to the Midwest, but this was a situation where a 78-year-old man who was suffering from early onset dementia, also had issues with diabetic and cardiac-related health issues, went missing. And his family was very worried. The local police department was able to use the Flock safety system to identify and locate this man within an hour and be able to return him back to his family and his loved ones.
Thank you, Matt and Lorianne. Appreciate it. Council, if we're allowed to move forward, the next steps we'd like to take is to work with you to host community stakeholders to provide education and seek input sometime in January. If all goes well, we hope to prepare a recommendation for the council in March for a possible budget request. At that time, that concludes our presentation. We're open for your questions. Thank you.
Through the chair.
Thank you for your presentation. Yes, please go ahead.
All right, so I'm looking here, and I see that the data is deleted after 30 days, but I just want it to be made clear that it says that, and it also says that you do have the ability to grant law enforcement access to specific footage for a short period, 24 hours, 48 hours, or however long the customer desires. At what point would it be deleted if, you know, the police officers needed more time for whatever investigation? Yeah.
Well, it does account for police officers to be able to save data that is used in an open investigation. So during the course of that investigation, they would save it, and if it's valuable as evidence, they would submit it as evidence to the court. So it would be saved.
Not on the flock system.
Right. It would be pulled from the FLAC system and then entered into evidence with the Ferndale Police Department.
But you could have it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Through the chair, couple of questions. Can FLOC itself or agents from FLOC access data that is captured, assuming that Ferndale were to install devices in the city of Ferndale?
I'm going to let FLAC talk about that.
So no, you guys own your data. So you determine who accesses it and who you share it with, right? So a couple of things on that. We will not access your data unless you give us explicit permission to do so for a specific reason. And moreover, it actually is a CJIS requirement that all folks that are accessing our law enforcement portal have criminal justice information systems certification. And so the only folks that are doing that are law enforcement professionals.
So let me just repeat some of that back to you so I make sure I understand what you're saying.
Definitely.
So, so FLOC as an entity is technically capable of accessing that data, but as part of the agreement will not unless there's an explicit request to do so. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm hoping that folks who know a little bit more about data security weigh in, because I don't know that much about it. I know that it's a concern that we talked about a little bit, because council got a little preview of some of this information. But can you talk about, and it's going to go over my head, but can you talk about what security is in place? How is the data stored? How is it secure? What are the layers keeping it from getting hacked?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually encrypt your data at every point of the collection and transfer process. So when the image of the back of the vehicle is taken on our device, when it's in transfer to the cloud server, and when it's on the cloud server being stored, it's encrypted in different ways. And we use a variety of different encryptions. I think it's AES and KMS, a combination of both of those in order to make it even more secure. Moreover, the cloud servers that we're using are through the AWS government cloud services, and those are the most secure servers out there. We also, on our own, have a whole team of cybersecurity experts who are making sure that there are no vulnerabilities in our system. So that's a little bit of insight in the steps we've taken to try to protect y'all's data.
I guess related to that question, and this might be better answered by Captain Spellman or the chief. It's my understanding that, because a number of other cities have this technology, that there's sort of sharing data back and forth, but that if Ferndale were to move forward, Ferndale's data would have to be accessed by someone within the Ferndale organization and turned over to a partner who requests it. Can you talk about the proposed policy of how that would work? What's the actual mechanism? How would the information be shared with another department?
Want to handle that, Chief?
The way this is, I'm sorry, is this thing on?
I think so.
I think so.
The way the system is designed, there would be a MOU between between agencies belonging to the system. We would like to vet these other departments to make sure that their policies are consistent with our own policy before we would move forward with them. This is something that we will have to look into as we proceed. That is what I have in mind. We are an accredited agency. We have a high standard for accountability and auditing, and I'd like to demand the same from agencies that are who would be having access to our system as well. That's something that we need to take on. I need to have conversations with my colleagues and look at what is going on with them. I've already personally looked at policies like Madison Heights, and it is certainly in line with what we have. But that I understand your concern, knowing that you may fully trust our personnel, but maybe not another departments, and I'm in touch with that. That's why we need to raise the standard across the board for participating agencies. So that's kind of what I have. That's what my thought process is at this point. But you know, we're not quite there yet. But that is something that I would like to add to our policy.
And I guess while we're on that same topic, can you describe what would be sort of the lowest threshold crime that you would recommend using this data for? And I mean, I'll just be blunt. Would we be looking for example, you know, people who haven't paid tickets or low-level offenses that are often driven by poverty? Would we be looking for data to capture those particular crimes?
No, I would have no reservation to even include a provision like that in the policy. It's simply not a priority for law enforcement, certainly not a priority for the Ferndale Police Department. And I would go so far as to include, migrants or border patrol, or it's just simply not, doesn't align with our values or priority for our community, if that makes sense.
Yes, very much so. And I guess this is more of a comment than a question. But moving forward as the proposed policies continue to develop, I know they've been drafted, I hope that we can keep those priorities in mind, so that if we do get to the point of sharing information with other departments, we're not necessarily sharing information that we would not pursue ourselves.
Right. Simply speaking with my colleagues across the board, there is no shortage of crimes to investigate in law enforcement, and there is always a shortage of investigators. So those resources really are not used for the types of infractions that you're speaking of. But I do understand the concern, and we are in touch with that.
And finally, I think this is my finally, thank you for providing this presentation to give us time. This is new technology. It's sort of a big lift to learn the capabilities as well as the limitations and the policy structure that would go along with it. So I'm grateful that we're getting this presentation and having the opportunity to digest it and get some public input before having to vote and move forward. So thank you for that. And Captain Spellman, I wondered if you would elaborate a little bit on the stakeholder input that you'll be seeking early next year?
Well, definitely residents for one, but also a lot of businesses are affected by this technology, and a lot of businesses have approached us asking for more video surveillance or photographic surveillance. So we would like to get their input as well as residents in the community.
In what way do you plan to seek resident input, and how can we help answer people's questions, get them engaged in the conversation if they're concerned about this?
We would love to host a meeting, a public meeting, where we could have representatives from the police department and FLOC, and maybe other police departments that already have the system, other council members who have gone through the same vetting process that you are going through, to weigh in and give feedback and input.
If I could add, there are the councils that are a little bit ahead of us, and they were in the same position you are, where initially there's some I guess anxiety or apprehension, and they decided to do it on a trial basis with a pilot program to prove to their community that it would be used ethically. And I think that they found overwhelming response and support from even council members across our community that were once skeptical. But that's why we're approaching you in this way. We want you to not feel rushed in a decision. We want you to understand fully what we are asking and know that we're willing to engage our community so that there is overwhelming support moving forward.
And I lied, I do have one last thing. And again, this is probably more of a comment than a question, unless the FLOC folks can weigh in on what they've seen from other communities. I hope that as we move forward and even think, again, if this does go into place, thinking about camera placement and equity. We're a predominantly white community that borders predominantly black communities, and I'm very concerned about camera placement, focusing on our neighbors who we don't want to put on the defensive, don't want them to feel targeted or surveilled, and the equity, I suppose, in the results based on the placement. So I don't know if folks from FLOC can give examples of communities that have done a really good job at incorporating equity in their plans, or if anyone else has something to say about that topic.
Councilmember James, we're going to try to take an objective, data-driven approach to placement of the cameras. We certainly want to maximize their effectiveness, and I think we'll let the data kind of like direct us. We're in touch with where you're coming from as far as our neighbors to the south, and patrolling 8 Mile and adding cameras to an already sensitive area. Detroit Police Department is already part of the FLOC network. It's not something that the Detroit community is not accustomed to, but we have to prioritize. We have 2 8-lane highways that run through our city, and we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we weren't maximizing the traffic volume passing through our community. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck as far as a camera is concerned. And then obviously after we evaluate Woodward and 8 Mile, then the secondaries. Obviously Pinecrest is a priority for us with a high school right at 8.5 in Pinecrest. So Pinecrest would be a priority, Livernois, Hilton, and then the major cross streets, 9 Mile Road, the downtown, and Woodward Heights. So that, I mean, but I would suggest, and I think that Flock would probably agree, that traffic volume would be the number one data point we would look at, and then after that, it would be strategic based on entry and exit points in the city, is basically how they align. But we will have to make a decision based on, we understand that there may be a budget limitation, so we have to choose wisely and to maximize our effort.
Thank you.
And the chief mentioned earlier about the pilot process, and so that allows him to have the data needed in order to decide the best distribution of the cameras.
Are there any other council members who have questions?
Questions?
If you have comments, we should probably wait till,
Well, we don't have a motion.
no questions. No questions. There is no motion tonight. We're not passing anything. So, go ahead. Oh, do you have a question?
I do. So I noticed that there are certain neighboring cities that you have listed here in the presentation, Captain Spellman. To the Flock team or chiefs or the captain, are there newer additions to this type of technology? I mean, I know you mentioned Detroit, so I didn't see them here, so I didn't know that they utilized it. But are there other cities that are relatively close to us that have utilized this?
I'll let Matt speak to that. I believe there's about 50 in the state, and we do have more local ones than that.
Yep, that's correct. So approximately 50 agencies across the state of Michigan have partnered with Flock Safety. I would say with a good majority of them being in the Metro Detroit area.
I can add that Michigan State Police, Oakland County Sheriff's Department, Farmington Hills.
Yep.
Farmington Hills are some of the closest ones.
Along with Madison Heights.
Oh yeah, Hazel Park, Madison Heights, Southfield, Shelby Township, Sterling Heights.
All right, Councilman Polka.
I just want to say that, I'm very supportive of this, this program. And maybe it's because I'm familiar with it from a technology standpoint, being the tech nerd that I am. The data that they're talking about is probably more secure than your credit card information that you're using on the internet. I just think it's a really great program. I think of the dollar store owner who was murdered about 12 years ago up on North Hilton, and I think how this could have, solved that case. It's still unsolved. And it's because, we have no idea who left that facility or that building. We could have tracked them on Hilton.
Absolutely.
So that's all I have.
All right. To the city manager or the chief, when do you expect this to come to council for a vote, given there's going to be engagement?
Through the chair, it's back on. Okay. I will be meeting with the chief in communications to discuss tentative dates and promotional opportunities. But I expect public engagement in January, and then we'll digest the feedback and we'll have more information to request any specific plan recommendations forward. But we would need the input first, so over the next 90 days.
Okay. Well, thank you again. As Mayor Pro Tem James said earlier, City Council did get a preview with the police department and Flock, and I appreciate your presentation tonight and the process we're going through. So thank you for the...
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the agenda. Next up is call to audience. We set aside 30 minutes to have residents and guests talk about anything on their mind related to Ferndale, I guess, or not Ferndale, but we ask you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And we do have a clock up here, and one of our staff members will be monitoring or starting the clock. But we invite you to come up and have join us and sharing what's on your mind. Is there anybody in the audience tonight who would like to speak tonight? To talk about how great your Christmas decorations are, your holiday lighting, how you're preparing for the storm that's apparently coming. All right, well, seeing none, I expect everybody is ready to get on with the holidays and with their family and friends. So with that, I'm going to close call to audience and move on to the public hearing. We only have one tonight. It is 6A, approval of the Community Development Block Grant Project Year 2023 application to fund eligible projects. We do this every year, required by federal law for the CDBG program. And again, there are 4 steps to the public hearing. First step is a presentation by city staff and or if there's an applicant joining the staff person to give comment. The second step is questions of fact from city council to staff. The third, I will open it up for public comment. And then fourth, city council will move into a motion and discuss and debate the item. So with that, we're going to start with Emily from our code enforcement building inspection to go over the program for 2023. Thank you, Emily.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We are here tonight. I am Emily Loomis, the building inspector for the Community and Economic Development Department for Ferndale, and I'm here to discuss the 2023 the 2023 CDBG application to fund eligible projects. For a brief history, CDBG is a collection of grants that previously pre-1974 were scattered throughout the federal government's funding allocations that were there to help communities provide services to residents in need, public infrastructure improvements, and a common theme heard throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s is that these were inaccessible, or had we known that we had access to $30,000 or $50,000, we could have saved tax dollars, or kept a teacher on staff, or saved a job at fire, police. And the federal government moved to take all these projects and put them under a singular umbrella known as the Community Development Block Grant, the block quite literally being grouping them together. And since that period of time through the Federal Housing and Urban Development, or as we typically know as HUD for short, communities have participated by submitting applications either directly to the federal government or through as a pass-through or subrecipient, which the city of Ferndale is. We are a subrecipient of Oakland County, as in we compile our application and eligible programs at the discretion and pleasure of council. We submit that to Oakland County. They vet it for accuracy and then do the final submittal on behalf of 52 other communities, or 51 in addition to Ferndale, to the federal government to establish what the timeline looks like. Last December, I was out of the office, but Community Economic Development brought the application forward. We had our public hearing. Application was submitted, and we're expecting the release of funds from last year to happen in January of 2023. So to kind of establish to reiterate that, to establish what the timeline looks like for tonight's application is project year 2023. We would expect those funds to be released between December and February, so December of 23 through February of 24. In previous years, we've seen funds released in the summer. Other years, we've seen funds take up to 16 months, and then 2 years later, we've had a quote-unquote windfall of funds. It's a little editorializing on my part, my apologies. And those funds were used to do park improvements in conjunction with the Ferndale Parks and Recreation at Wanda and Harding Park, the baseball fields and such. So What I'm bringing forward tonight is the planning allocation, which is what the county tells us we have to divide amongst eligible projects. This year's estimated allocation is $87,878. I have 4 projects to present in allocation amount and down. We have $60,877 for minor home repair. To recap how we're using minor home repair dollars right now, we have been using them, one for eligible households for the sidewalk repair program this year. Any who would apply through the hardships application and process in the Sidewalk Hardship Committee. We were able to use the minor home repair dollars for that. We have also been utilizing minor home repair dollars to an effective cooperation with Oakland County's Community and Neighborhood Development Department by pairing with homeowners who are accessing the county loans. We are able to pair minor home repair dollars with those loans at higher allocations than normally allowed. We are capped at $5,000 per project for minor home repair. By being able to take these and partner them with the county under specific reprogramming of those funds, it's a very technical way of saying Oakland County asked HUD, can we use more than we're allowed to help this homeowner keep their home? And because of that, we've been able to utilize larger funds that would normally, in one case in particular, I have to anonymize the results, but it was the person had asked the county for a roof repair. The roof repair required a complete tear off, down to, in as far as replacing trusses and rafters. So we had to order engineered trusses, and it was a massive project. And because of our ability to utilize these funds, we are able to take a $19,000 county project and put another $15,000 on top of it. So not only did they get a new roof, they were able to get new gutters to protect their foundation, and the repair of unsafe wiring in the kitchen and first and second floor bathrooms. So that is one of the thoughtful ways in which we as a city have been able to utilize these funds for minor home repair. We will be seeing in March of this year a more general application of minor home repair. We will be working with the communications department to do a public outreach to solicit applications through the year, to work with ourselves and a vendor to fund these $5,000 capped projects. Again, those funds, though, would be eligible, and I could probably talk about minor home repair all night. I am going to move on so it doesn't turn into the minor home repair show. The next one we see is a public service project. And when we say public service, we're referring to helping individuals who might qualify, in this case, due to age and income or disability and income. So yard services is a project we use with an outside vendor to cut grass, remove snow, and depending on budget years and the amount of residents we have participating, we are able to provide fall and spring yard cleanups. We've had more residents than in the recent years than previously, so we've had to forego those for the larger projects like the biweekly grass cutting and the snow removal. Historically, we had about 18 to 20 residents for grass cutting. At points of the summer, we were able to squeeze in 28 people. And then food banks, we haven't had our funds. Last year was the first year we had asked for food bank project funding. We haven't had those funds released, but to just reiterate what food banks will look like, any agency that is able to qualify under SAMS, which is the award system for, I'm blanking, I'm having an aphasia on what, system for award management? Yep. Thank you. And any qualifying local agency that offers food banks will be eligible to bid for this. We will solicit all eligible Ferndale businesses, of which, or local organizations and nonprofits, asking them to put in a bid, at which point they'll be evaluated with staff and HUD criteria. Victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. This one is something that the city has continually funded, and we're now at over 2 decades of funding. The funds go directly from the county on behalf of Ferndale to Haven, which is located in Pontiac, just south of county offices on Telegraph Road. And with that, that is this year's presentation for the public hearing of CDBG project year 2023.
All right, thank you for your presentation. I'm going to open it up for, wait a minute. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Step 2, public comment. I'm opening up public comment for the public hearing at 8:01. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to make a comment about the proposed programming for the Community Development Block Grant Program for 2023? All right, seeing none, I am closing public comment for this public hearing at 8:02 and opening it up for questions from council to staff at this time. Are there any questions at this time?
I may through the chair.
Sure.
So I'm looking at the proposed allocation, and it looks like, based on the allocation right now, all of the CBDG funds are utilized. So I was just wondering, and I don't know if I've asked you this last year, I don't know, but if something is not utilized, is there a rollover? Does it have to all be used within a certain period of time?
Yes, thank you. So all funds do have to be utilized. For example, some of the funding we had from the project years of 2019 and 2020 had been delayed in spending due to ARPA funds. Some of our local nonprofits and vendors who tend to work in the community development and social services found themselves with, and I don't want to call it a problem, but for brevity and being poetic, we'll call it a good problem. They had a surplus of funding due to ARPA funds and other pandemic-related grants and aid from the federal government and local and state agencies. Due to that, we've had a couple projects be slightly delayed in their funding, particularly yard services was one where a couple of local vendors had extra funding. Due to that, there's what they call a capture process with HUD, and our contract compliance division at the county will reach out and we'll have to provide a written explanation of why we have not expended the funds, what are the factors, and when we anticipate that we will spend the funds. And then every September, we also provide what is accruals, where I would show the county and HUD, I've spent $8,000. I've yet to ask for $8,000 back because maybe we went on a particular invoicing cycle that was outside of the traditional county budget year. But historically, yes, if we find ourselves unable to spend funds within a year, which is relatively rare, but again, it does happen due to some circumstances, usually out of our control. And when that happens, we have the ability to request it. And thankfully, HUD has been understanding when we find ourselves in a situation, though it is rare.
So even with the allocations, HUD typically accepts that and then just waits for the report as to how things were spent. Is that?
That is correct, yes. They allow us to give them our deadline. You know, if we say, well, we think we can have these funds expended by March 1st of 2024, on March 2nd of 2024, they would be calling just to make sure that the checks, the reimbursement request is in the mail.
Through the chair, I have two questions. One, are the amounts relatively fixed, or do we get to increase them over time because services and goods cost more over time? And another way of asking it is, are we seeking the most that we can possibly qualify for?
The allocation, when I say allocation, referring to the 87 for this year, $87,878, that number is based and can change. It is not unheard of for the county to call 6 months after the city, have submitted our application and request us to determine where to put surplus of funds. So it's happened that we've had an extra $3,000 or $8,000. One of the complications is that there's a 30% public service cap. So food banks, victims of domestic violence, and yard services are called public service projects, which means we're not allowed to exceed 30% of that entire allocation. And that whole allocation, the $87,878, is determined based off of, this is why it was always so important, you saw me up here all the time talking about the census, the census data helps determine eligibility of areas. We get a map each year, and that is shaded different colors, basically white and yellow, for eligibility, for determine off the income and age of residents in those areas. And with that data by the census and Department of Labor, all the different sources that federal government gathers their information, that is where we get our allocation.
And then my last question is just how do we connect these services to those in need? And conversely, how do those in need access these services? How do they know how to reach out?
There's a couple different paths, and each project is somewhat unique. Although, for example, Haven is an established presence. Just because, let's say, Haven spends the $7,000 allocation from Ferndale, it doesn't mean anyone from Ferndale will be turned away. With that, it is part of our internal communications that if we do find people in need, or maybe they reach out to the city either informationally in distress. Sometimes it can come from someone calling a lot of calls seem to go to the city clerk. Sometimes they're at the front counter. Sometimes they're at the police department, fire department, or maybe our building inspection team encounters somebody on an inspection that might need assistance. It is part of internal communications to pass that information on. When we're looking at larger programs or newer programs, we are allowed up to 15% of an allocation towards administrative. So we can draft communication materials. So in our March of 2023 bid for minor home repair, that will include the creation and distribution of information about the program. So it'll be materials sometimes just as simply as on the front counter, but also around the city, and with vendors that we think are most likely to interact, as well as internal communications with staff and city website, social media, as our communications director sees fit.
And the print newsletter.
Through the chair. I'm a little confused. You have said the figure 87,878, but the suggested action has 86,878. Your background description has 87,878, but when I add up the individual 4 items, it comes to 86,878. So I'm not sure which. Which figure
Yeah,
is-
I believe unfortunately in the item background, that would be a mistake that I made. And the allocation is 86,878. Yeah, that is an erroneous
Okay.
mistake. on
I just
that.
want to make sure, because, you know, the motion, what you suggested is 86, but I noticed a couple of times you had mentioned the 87.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the clarity.
Yeah, and my apologies for the inaccuracy.
That's fine.
I have one more question. So I'm looking at the allocations for the yard, food, and victims of domestic violence. And like, as you said, Haven, they have their standard and they just utilize the funds as they deem fit. But I was wondering, and also I know that based on where I work, that the yard services are very, very popular in this area. But I was wondering, is there some opportunity to include all people of, all community members of the 48220 area code for the food banks, et cetera, because, and what I'm referring to is our neighboring Royal Oak Township people.
So specifically with food banks, we are asking that the funds follow the guidelines of being distributed to Ferndale residents, but with the caveat that we are not requiring identification, ID, or proof of residency. Those are not, with HUD's permission, those are records that will not be sought. There has been historically an issue with over-IDing and alienating people who are looking for aid, or not even having access to identification for different reasons, economically, transportation. I have volunteered at multiple food shelters in Ferndale and in other communities, and it is standard practice to take verbal confirmation that somebody is income eligible and in need, especially because demand in someone's life does not necessarily equal their appearance. And so it would be explicit policy that is supported in writing by both HUD and the county, and will be part of any RFPs and vendor agreements and contracts, that there'll be no discrimination or requirements of photo identification. Just those who identify as in need would be qualifying at our participating food bank.
Through the chair, working off of Councilmember Leaks May's inquiry, I believe a number of our neighboring communities are also eligible for CDBG funds. So Hazel Park or Royal Oak Township are probably receiving, you know, I don't know if it's the same amount, but, you know, a good percentage of funds that they use toward these same programs, correct?
That's correct. Yes, and they're actually available on the Oakland County website. You can see each, and I keep the programs available. They're usually distributed on March 1st of the year. I keep them available at, or I should, it's not me personally, the city keeps them available at the front counter of City Hall. So you can see not only what projects Ferndale's currently and funding in the past, but you can see what our neighboring communities' allocations are and what they're choosing to fund too.
Could you email that to us when it comes out, Emily?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, they provide both hard copies and digital copies are available on the website, so I'd be more than happy to assemble that.
Thank you.
I hope that brings you some comfort.
I am supportive of this slate of, I guess we should need to go into motion if we want to proceed before I make comment.
I move to approve the funding recommendations submitted by the CED Department for the attached 2023 project year CDBG grant application in the amount of $86,878 from account 280000886,000 as submitted by the building inspector.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem and supported by Councilwoman Mikulski. I have a couple comments. One specifically, I was supportive of, the food bank. It was a different direction than we've used the monies in the past. And based off of, we would be doing and contributing to a very valid cause. The challenge I have is that it's not quantitative in the results of the funds that we're spending. We have no idea how many residents and/or, in fact, if Ferndale residents. This is a program that still hasn't been implemented, so I am open to exploring to see how this works. Particularly, you need a SAM number, which is a federal authorized number showing that your nonprofit is an organization that can accept federal funds, which may preclude any food bank that is not associated with the federal government to receive those funds, but they are a food bank that is locally. So we would be, it's between the big guys and the small guys of food banks. Of who would get the money. So this is a concern for me. This is something I will look for, and that whoever applies to be a provider, I would hope that there would be some quantifiable way to show that we are impacting Ferndale residents with our CDBG funds, which is the whole purpose of CDBG funds. So I don't want to say food banks is not a valid cause. It truly is. But in terms of looking for accountability and data-driven outcomes for how we're spending this money, that is something I'm looking for as we explore how the funding of our $9,000 of food bank will go. And then more as a rumination and just sort of, I really do think the CDBG formula is an outdated formula created decades ago based off of population, and I really think it pits smaller cities against bigger cities. And I think we saw that allocation in play with the ARPA fund distribution when cities around us who are entitlement, non-entitlement, and we are non-entitlement, when other cities around us got $312 per person, because I did the math, per capita, and and we got like
20 cents.
20, no, it was like $87 per resident in Ferndale. So the funding formula, so the ARPA funds showed that there was truly inadequate, considerations for older communities, particularly older communities around transit stops, where we would provide housing and affordable housing. Does not provide us the same amount of funds to do those types of work that the federal government says that the funding is for. Townships and growth areas get more money than us because of population total, and I just want to go on record, I think it's wrong. I've been talking to my Congress people about it, so anyway, that's Mayor's statement for the evening on CDBG, but I'm glad we're using the funds the way that we are.
And I do have one more comment.
I have a comment too.
So, and it actually is just off of Mayor Pro Tem James's comment about the allocation and amounts. I do recall in years past, the the funds it's a different amount every year. So I know that for a fact that the way in which it seems like the allocations seem to increase when you're able to increase it, because I remember for the longest time, the Haven funds were about 5,000, now they're 7,000. So, and you said it's roughly 30% of what's allocated. And also based on what Mayor Piana stated, what's the criteria for the amount that we get, because it changes every year? So what's it based on?
It is based off of the census data.
The census data.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's one of the reasons I think that was one of the talking points during our census drives and information campaigns, because this really does help govern how local dollars are allocated. So it does take in economic data and population.
We've never been higher than $90,000. That is, I think, the peak we've ever had for CDBG allocations. In comparison, other cities have millions of dollars to allocate to affordable housing, and that doesn't even include home repair and any of the services we provide. My nonprofit that I worked for on Detroit's east side got so much more CDBG funds as a nonprofit in the city of Detroit than we get for a city of our size in Ferndale, as an example. But anyway, I digress.
I just wanted to mention that in regards to, sorry, brain freeze, food banks. I worked with a nonprofit many years ago that had a food bank portion of a project, but what we did was we received government funds that allowed people to receive a $20 food voucher at like a Kroger, but it could only cover dairy, fruits and vegetables, which is very hard to get at a food bank. And I don't know if that may be a component of this as well, because food banks are great for dry canned goods, but they don't offer, you know, milk and cheese and bread and fruits and vegetables, which, you know, people need as part of their diet. So I hope whatever program this money goes to does cover that aspect of it, because just buying more canned goods isn't going to help anybody.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Let it roll.
James?
Yes.
Mikulski?
Yes.
Leaks May?
Yes.
Polika?
Yes.
Piana?
Yes. All right, that concludes our public hearing. Thank you, everyone. And I'm moving on to the consent agenda because it's the last meeting of the year. I almost got the full alphabet here. Stay with me as I read them all. 7A, approval of November 28th, 2022 meeting minutes. 7B, I'm going to go as fast as possible, council. Approval of the Ferndale Police Department to auction and dispose of lost and abandoned property via property room in accordance with local ordinance number 114 and the number listed in state law 434-183. 7C, approval to renew a pawnbroker's license to be located at 1461 East 8 Mile Road to be held by Mark Audrey as Motor City Pawnbrokers 3, and approval of 2 surety bonds, each in the amount of $1,500. 7D, approval of electronic door operator installation and electronic lock integration at City Hall by Motor City Electric Technologies in the amount of $6,017. 7E, approval of boiler flue relocation construction documents for City Hall and Police Station by Lauren Engineering in the amount of $6,500. 7F, approval of deck repairs and floor drain relocation at the DOT by Structural Technologies LLC for $15,600. 7G, approval to backfill the DPW supervisor position due to the recent departure of the incumbent. 7H, approval to purchase a replacement air compressor for the Public Works Motor Pool Garage from Detroit Air Compressor Company in the amount of $6,740. The expense to be charged to Public Service Motor Pool Capital Outlay account number 101443977. 7I, extension of the license agreement between the City of Ferndale and Ferndale Mexican Inc. for the use of municipal parking spaces in the city's municipal lot number 8. 7J, approval to adopt 2023 city meeting and observe holiday schedule. 7K, approval to consent to assignment of city agreements in the manner of 141 Vester. 7L, approval of the reappointment of Alan Heel to the Accessibility and Inclusion Commission for a 3-year term expiring November 26, 2025. 7M, approval of the reappointment of John Gauthier as alternate to the Board of Review for a 2-year term expiring December 31st, 2024. 7N, approval of bills and payrolls submitted by the Finance Director and subject to review by the Council Finance Committee. What is the pleasure of City Council?
I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Moved by Polika and supported by Mikulski.
Polika?
Yes.
Mikulski?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Leaks May?
Yes.
Piana?
Yes, just in time. All right, we're moving on to the regular agenda, which is 8A, resolution of intent to issue up to $12 million in revenue bonds to fund water and sewer infrastructure improvements over the next 5 years. Who's up for?
Through the chair, the DPW, Dan Tosick, will speak to the construction work portion of the item, and then I can speak to the resolution portion, which is a requirement of issuing bonds.
All right. Thanks, Dan, for taking us through this.
Yeah, good evening tonight, Mayor and Council. So, tonight we're here to bring forth a resolution to issue revenue bonds to fund our water and sewer infrastructure projects over the next 5 years. This was part of the water rate study that was completed that we would do bond funding for our projects instead of completing those as pay as we go. So typically we're planning out 20 years in advance, 20 to 15 years in advance for our water and sewer related projects. And then throughout those years, typically at minimum on a yearly basis, we're looking back at our cost estimates and adjusting accordingly with our budget process. So really this, over the next 5 years, looks a lot like the past 10 years for us here in the city of Ferndale. It's water main replacement projects. We're replacing our older water main. It's sewer televising, cleaning, and assessments that help us plan out our sewer lining work. Some work that we have planned that we haven't been doing is some manhole rehabilitations. We've been performing assessments, and then over the coming years we'll be actually doing rehabilitations where we're going in, pointing up those structures, and getting the block and mortar repaired as needed. Additionally, we included some dollars over the next coming fiscal years for some stormwater related improvements that we have yet to identify exactly what we're going to be working on, but going to be working towards some green infrastructure, identifying where we may have some capacity issues within our combined system and so on. And then we also have some facility related issues, or not issues, but replacements, scheduled upgrades and stuff like that. And those are going to be going on at the Hilton Pump Station, which we bring our water in and into our distribution system through from Great Lakes Water Authority. So some of that's just replacing some of the computers that control the pumps that go on and off and regulate the supply of water into the city of Ferndale, in addition to some facility needs as it relates to the our master replacement schedule for AC units, general HVAC, items like that our facility manager has planned out for us in the coming years. So really looking to kind of continue on what we've been doing. For the most part, each calendar year, we're really looking at doing 2 to 3 water main replacements per year. Our lead service line replacement program that we currently have going isn't necessarily factored into this because we're working off of bond funding through the state of Michigan. But, with this resolution, it would allow us to do some lead service line replacements if we do need to do that to continue on our funding route. So one of the things that we have seen over the past, not just past year, but past 2 years are some pretty substantial price increases in terms of material, labor, fuel, and so on. We took a look back at our numbers that we had originally put together and saw that they were a bit out of line with what we're seeing in the market right now. And some of those examples that I can share as it relates to what those cost increases look like. Last week I sat in on a regional economic outlook forum webinar presented by Great Lakes Water Authority that they've been working on over the past year with public sector consultants and a few other stakeholders. And it wasn't necessarily a ton of good news when they were presenting their information. So for example, with some of the key materials that we use on our water main projects, since January of 21, iron and steel pipe has seen a 71% increase in cost. Concrete's seen roughly a 30% increase in cost. Aggregates, your stone, sand, and so on, that's seen almost a 30% increase in cost, almost over a 2-year period. And that doesn't take into factor in the increase in labor costs that we've seen. And then while normal unleaded fuel prices have come back down to roughly January 2021 levels. Diesel fuel, which is the main component fueling the equipment and the trucks that are doing this work, is still roughly 50% more than it was in January 2021. So a lot of different fun factors to take into consideration going with our work. So knowing that that is the case, we are going to be continuously looking at and reevaluating what our project costs are. And sitting in on that forum, you know, one of the assumptions made is that, you know, we may see some cooling down of inflation, which will help bring down market costs overall. Best case scenario, we see that towards the latter part of calendar year 2023. And it also helps kind of work out some of the kinks in the supply chain that are also helping drive these higher costs on material. So it does look a bit different, but overall, you know, we are confident that we can continue to, you know, maybe we're not doing 3 water main replacements in 2025 and we're doing 2 of them instead, and just kind of stretching those dollars out. But really what we want to be doing is making sure that we're still putting dollars into our infrastructure because we do have an aging infrastructure. We're not a young community that has, you know, water main that was installed 4 years ago. We are a community that is replacing water main that was installed 100 years ago. So, and same thing goes with, you know, our combined sewer system. You know, that needs, you know, continual maintenance, upgrades, and investment. So we want to make sure we can continue to go down that. And one of the requirements we'll need to continue with the work that we're doing is funding via a bond issuance. And with that, I'll hand it over to Joe.
Yeah, to summarize, the motion for this evening is a requirement of issuing revenue bonds. City Council does have the authority to issue revenue bonds, but it requires one, adoption of the resolution that specifically states the purpose for the bonds, the dollar amount. In this case, it's not to exceed $12 million. And I expect this to be issued over 2 bond issuances. Once a bond issue is issued, the city has 3 years to spend those bonds. So we're requesting not to exceed $12 million. The reason we're requesting not to exceed, we do have a proposed capital schedule. We don't know. We're at the high point of prices right now, so my hope is that in the future it won't take the full $12 million. So should it not, out of a concern for the ratepayers, we would be as conservative as possible with that bond issue if we didn't need the full $12 million. So that is what's in front of council tonight. This is a notice to issue the resolution, a resolution to issue the bonds. Once this is adopted, the public has 45 days to determine if they would like to petition this to go to the ballot. And that's the purpose of this resolution, is it provides that public access point. With that, we have included in the packet debt service schedules, various debt service schedules prepared by our bond counsel, a scope of work sample from Dan for capital improvements for the water system, and we also included the water rate study just as a refresher from last March, where we talked about this being the more efficient way for ratepayers.
Are there questions from council to Dan or Joe?
Through the chair. Just so that everyone is aware, we're requesting $12 million in bonds. That's over 15 years, correct?
Over the construction period. In this case, Dan, can you remind me of the construction period?
Construction period would be over a 5-year period. The bond repayment would be over a longer term.
15 years.
20, I believe.
15 to 20, depending on.
Okay. But we're also at the mercy of interest rates. So as interest rates have gone up, we're also impacted by that as well.
Government is less impacted by that than the private market.
But we're still looking at probably 4% interest rate, as opposed to.
I would say at the high level.
Yeah.
With the city's current credit rating, it would be, we've seen in recent, that it's less than 4%.
Yeah.
But
we're not going to see what we saw a couple years ago, which was like 2%.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I just wanted that to be out there.
Are there other questions?
Through the chair, just to piggyback off that question. So on the schedule of debt service requirements example that we have within the packet with the 4% interest rate, are we saying that that could be a little bit less or it could be more?
Our recent history would suggest that's less. That is typically with our credit rating, the 4% is their max, and so their estimates are the worst case assumption of 4%. But in the past bond issuances within the last 2 years, the city's achieved closer to the lower threes.
When does our Moody's credit rating come out again?
We would get rated once we issue the bonds. As part of the bond issuance, we're rated. And I think Dan said he would need the funds in May, so we would issue probably in the spring.
And we got favorable bond rating for our last bond.
Correct, yes.
Through the chair, we just had a review of our finances at the 6 o'clock meeting. Is there anything in there that we should be concerned about that may affect our bond rating?
No, not in the case of this. They're going to be specifically looking at the water and sewer and fund and other policy work.
Okay.
Through the chair, again, to piggyback on, is there anything in there that we should be cognizant of or consider in terms of our ability to repay based on this schedule, this 20-year schedule? At interest rate, supposedly around like 3 to 4%.
Not with the water and sewer fund.
Okay.
The reason why the water and sewer fund is viewed as a safe investment by the bond market is because it's a commodity. Water is required. So where there's population, there will be water. So they view that as a more of a safe investment.
And there's ratepayers.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, and, sorry, through the chair, and we can adjust the rate if we need to pay the debt.
So through the chair, one more question. We've already implemented a policy that's going to have that staggered rate increase over the next 5 years, correct? Does this impact that at all? Is there the opportunity to bring down that rate?
This was factored into that rate as we presented last year. So the counterfactual, if we paid as we went, the rate would be higher because you'd have to be paying as you go and raise all your capital to fund the projects for the next 6 months. So this makes it more predictable for the community.
Yes. If I can summarize, again, it's more predictable. The rates are higher, but they could be higher if we don't put in the bond. Right? Is that right? Because the
You're more subject to market fluctuations than you are with the...
So this is the best consistent possible outcome for the ratepayers in the city. So, as determined by city council policy months ago.
Through the chair, to call upon Councilman Polika's comment again, sorry to pick on you a third time tonight. If we did struggle with the bond repayment schedule, would that necessitate increasing the rates in order to make that bond repayment schedule?
Well, once they're sold, the schedule would be set.
Okay.
It would be a fixed schedule, not a variable rate. So our debt service would be predetermined.
Okay.
And so that would factor into our rates every year.
Yes, I understand where your question is going.
Thank you.
Right? Is this going to change over time? We say consistent now, but does that really mean consistent 5 years from now? Right? So, a good question. Good piggybacking.
Through the chair, and I apologize if I missed this part, but the attachment that has sort of a number of different options of different interest rates over 20 years versus 25 years, 10 million versus 12 million. What are the factors that are going to determine which of these options will be the one that happens?
I really can't speak to the details from the consultant, but I'd be happy to have them follow up with a memo to council on their expertise on that.
Well, I guess, like, what's going to decide between, if we go with 10 million versus 12 million, for example.
I thought you were referring to the interest rate, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I understand that the interest rate is, that's being used here is more of a guide, an estimate on the upper end. We'll find out what the actual interest rate is when we apply. I guess I'm asking more about the term of 20 years versus 25, and the bond amount of 10 million versus 12 million.
Candidly, we factored in the total net impact of the principal and interest requirements over the period of time. You factor that long-term cost against your impact, your immediate impact on ratepayers, understanding the times that we're in today, also expected time for the next 5 or 10 years based on Dan's costs. And those three things all factor into a recommendation. But ultimately, we have the model that council approved last year, so we could plug in a number of these to see if the debt service payments still fit within the model of the rates that we reviewed and said we would expect. And so with that, I believe we said not to exceed 12 million over 20 years, still fit in within the water rate model that we passed in terms of debt service.
Okay.
Well, it wouldn't have really had a material impact on the water rate, which was the primary mission.
And also through the chair, just to add some levity to the discussion, Dan, I swore I thought you said mammal rehabilitation when you said manhole rehabilitation. For about 15 seconds, I was like, what mammals are we talking about?
Unfortunately, Givels and Webster, they do a great job. They haven't really started dabbling in that area yet, but you never know.
Well, thank you for that moment of entertainment. In my head.
A lot of the, conversation we talk about on like price increases and things of that nature is, not everything holds true. You see the not to exceed 12 million.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that has to do with the numbers that we provided to, our consultants while they were doing the water rate study are a bit different today than they were in February of 2022 when we were putting those cost estimates together. So then it allows us to have a little bit of fluidity and say, okay, you know what, let's maybe delay a project for a year because it fits within the rate study and it's not going to have an impact on ratepayers. But if for some reason, let's say, we can do everything without having an impact on ratepayers, it allows us to go up to that amount versus having to, necessarily come back and say, hey, we need another $500,000 to do the projects that we wanted to do in fiscal year 26, 27.
All right, we need a motion to proceed.
Mayor, I move that we approve the notice of intent resolution to issue up to 12 million in revenue bonds to fund water and sewer infrastructure improvements through fiscal year ending 2028, as submitted by the DPW Director.
Second.
Moved by Councilwoman Leaks May and supported by Mayor Pro Tem James.
Leaks May.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Mikulski.
Yes.
Polika.
Yes.
Piana.
Yes. All right, so stay there, Dan. We're moving on to 8B, consideration of a contract modification to the 2022 Water Main Improvement Program and the estimated amount of $1,053,187.50. The expense to be charged to Water Sewer Fund Capital Outlay account number is listed.
Yes, so tonight the DPW is looking to request approval for a contract modification to our 2022 Water Main Improvement Program to include our 2023 Water Main Improvement Program. Now, this is quite different than what I have presented in past years or council has heard in past years regarding one of our larger dollar capital improvement programs, whether it's roads, water main, sewer, and that is due to some supply chain constrictions right now. And what we're basically asking to do is do a contract modification with FDM Contracting, who we currently have under contract right now for our 2022 water main improvement program, who was our low bid. FDM was our low bid in 2021 and in 2020, and they performed our water main work. And we are bringing this forth to you today to potentially complete the 2023 water main replacement program for a section of water main on Vester between Bermuda and Woodward, and a section of Sylvan's water main from, well, the only section on Sylvan, from Wolcott to Hilton. Now, we're bringing this forward because 2022, construction season has been not the easiest in terms of obtaining materials. For a while, getting contractors' ability, or just really anyone's ability to get their hands on some valves, pipe, has seen extended lead times. Over the summer, in working with our contractor and, talking with other folks in the industry, around, mid-summer lead times, we're looking, you might order your water main pipe. At that time, suppliers were generally guaranteeing that pipe within 40 weeks, which is quite a bit longer than it's been in the past. So what we started to do was work on our contract documents, get our plans all put together earlier than what we typically would to potentially bid that out. Maybe during that time, lead times would come down and become a bit more reasonable. But unfortunately, they continued to increase. So, some communities like Royal Oak, they had plan documents done, they bid out the material, just the material for their project, for their 2023 projects back in the summer. So we started working sooner. So we sat down and discussed what options do we have to complete work in 2023? Because, come September, what lead times we're looking like on pipe, and just the actual pipe itself, is suppliers are guaranteeing their customers pipe within 50 to 52 weeks, which let's say a year. So we worked through our normal scenario. We were hoping to potentially bring a bid award recommendation to council in January. We award that bid. Contract documents go to the attorney for review, go to the contractor to get signed off. Once they sign off on everything, we're possibly ordering material in, let's say, mid-February at this point. And if pipe is still 50 to 52 weeks out on a lead time, that's realistically, unless an earlier delivery, the contractor is able to accept. It doesn't really matter if we place the order or contractor places the order. That's pushing projects into calendar year 2024 and waiting until the spring of 2024. So one of the things that we did is we requested pricing from our contractor, FDM, for the 2023 work, just to see what that number would be. Because FDM did state that they had enough pipe on order or enough pipe on hand, I should say, to complete the work on the Vester water main, to where we could get that project done in 2023, and then they would order pipe, if council did approve, as soon as possible, to where, maybe they can get that pipe early, and we can get that work done in, let's say early fall, maybe late fall of 2023. The Sullivan work is not very water service line intense. It's really just replacing a section of main. Now, the Vester water main is a little bit trickier of a project to really push down the road. That's a project that we did pull up in our capital improvement program due to the developments slated to break ground on Vester. Right now, with the age of that main and the size of it, it does not provide adequate hydrant flows for a 4-story development. Operates for residential, 1-story development. We can get by with that. But due to the number of breaks that we've had on that section, that was a water main that we were looking at potentially pulling up into our schedule. But now that those developments are looking like they're going to break down sometime, we need to install a new water main on that section of Esther. So we'd be going from a 6-inch water main up to an 8-inch water main, new valves, new hydrants that, mathematically speaking, could handle the required flow for those hydrants for those properties. Now, with that Vester water main, because of the new developments and so on, we would be putting some numbers to paper and working with the developers on that for a reimbursement of some cost share of that project, because not only did we pull up Vester, really wasn't on our, it's kind of on our radar because of the breaks that we've had over the recent years. I think we've had, it was 4 or 5 since 2020 on just that section of Vester, and we'd be submitting for reimbursement on that, whether it's percentage. We haven't really put that number to paper yet, but the city would not be covering the entire cost of that section of water main. But then the Sullivan water main, that is a project that we've had on our capital improvement plan for at least 5 years now, with the plan to get it done in 2023, and that really just goes in line with our normal capital replacement schedule. That following year, we'd be going to the north and replacing water main on Mapledale. So, we do understand that this is a bit of a different request than council's ever seen in the past. FDM is, in terms of, economically speaking, they're not able to hold their same unit costs as when they bid the project in early February of 2022 and received the bid award. A lot of that's driven by costs on pipe is up, costs on valves are up, cement costs are up, aggregate costs are up, fuel costs are up, along with their labor costs as well. So they did explain those numbers and what those cost increases were and why what they were. We did vet a couple of suppliers as to what their lead time is on pipe. The one supplier indicated 50 weeks, the other supplier indicated 52 weeks. So in terms of working to get 2023 work done, we believe this is our best option right now, largely due to the fact that FDM does have pipe on hand in order to perform the work on Vester. Now, if we were to choose to, just perform that work on Vester and, push Sullivan, the contractor would want to look at their pricing and adjust accordingly, as they don't have that scale as they do with both of the projects. And then going forward, it's looking at the market. Hopefully it adjusts. The one thing we are seeing right now is that like gate valves and some of those other components for water main projects, lead times have been decreasing. Really what some of the suppliers are hoping for is a bitter, cold, long winter that allows them to catch up on their production and get more material available and try and decrease some of those lead times. So, going forward as we look at 2024, it's taking all those factors into account, getting our plan documents done even sooner in advance, and it could be one of those where, we're coming in asking for a request to award a bid for just the material, and then we'll bid the project out when we get the material, or something along those lines, as some of our neighboring communities are deciding to do. Now we could decide to switch material type over to plastic or something along those lines that is a viable option to do. That's not something that we've necessarily spec'd on our projects. We have very little plastic water main here in the city of Ferndale, but then again, I also have I don't know if they're like irrational fears that one day plastic water main will be something that we're seeing is leaching microplastics, is bad for public health and so on. As we kind of see with lead is a good material that, works now, but, as science advances and so on, maybe it's not the greatest thing in the world. So with that, it is still kind of like a recommendation to just stay with ductile iron like we have through the rest of the community. It's like materials and so on. And, with that, FDM quoted, after all said and done, if we factor in a road rental, which we're looking at doing this year, which is basically we're saying, okay, you need to pay so much per day in order to rent a lane of road to try and keep the contractor a bit more honest in terms of getting projects done sooner versus just looking at, you know, inspection days and something like that. You know, the overall cost comes into like approximately $1.2 million for the project, while just like the hard construction costs themselves, if we elected not to go the lane rental route, is, you know, $1,000,005 in terms of total construction costs for that project. So, you know, overall, this is a contract modification to our 2023 program. We did not solicit pricing from anyone else because we do not have anyone else under contract performing this work for the city. And FDM's done quality work. They've been a good partner to work with on the projects that they've done in the past, and they've performed a good job. So with that, this is our recommendation in order for us to try and get our 2023 work completed. Now, if it is council's decision to bid out the work, it's also not the end of the world. You know, we could potentially still get work done. It could be a lower price. It could be a higher price. In terms of whether it's lower or higher, you know, plus or minus if everything stays the same in terms of the economy right now, it shouldn't be too far off of FDM's pricing. You know, they were low cost in the last 3 years in a row. You know, we don't believe we're paying too much of a premium, but we also understand that, you know, this is, if we competitively bid this out, it is something that could potentially come in at a lower price. But if we have to bid the work out, we bid the work out. It may get done in 2023, a portion of the water main, or we may have to push these projects into 2024. If the developers break ground sooner than we're able to start our water main work, we'll figure out a way to, you know, work around each other.
Thanks, Dan. Are there any questions from council? More questions?
I do. So basically, we're trying to move this cost forward, but we didn't budget this expense in 2022-23 fiscal year. So do we have to readjust the budget to account for this, or are we really just approving this and this will actually move into the 23-24 fiscal year budget?
Through the chair, this, whether this is approved this evening or we go out to bid and approve a contract, it would be a budget adjustment because of the cost of materials, the rate, all of the assumptions were shot. So I think what Dan is saying, that those cost differentials are in mind with this proposal. Dan is presenting an option that is less risky for us to guarantee the work gets done. And so otherwise, you know, if through the bid process, we can't get any guarantees for the work, we also could just forego the work this year.
I understand that, and we also risk losing the product that the supplier has, because if we don't purchase it today or in the next week, they're at liberty to sell it to any other community. And, you know, we could get a rate back, but it could be a lot more. And this, to me, just sounds like the truck issue that we had a couple months back. You know, take what's on the lot, or, you know, wait and see what comes along, and it could be a lot more and not really what you want.
For the most part, yes. You know, really the biggest concern, no matter what pricing and what our cost estimates were when we formulated our budget and during that, you know, last winter budget cycle, our pricing, our cost estimates, they're off either way. Just due to the difficulty in making the assumptions that you would have had to make to be on the money to have our cost estimates in line for this work. So there you have a budget adjustment. Did we ever think that lead times on pipe would push out to a year? Not at all. There's probably a combination of factors of supply chain issues, the number of communities that are out there doing work because of the federal funds that are available to perform work, the increase that, state drinking water revolving funds are seeing in terms of money coming from the feds and applications and so on. So really we would like to get Vester done and completed prior to construction taking place, so we can make sure that, when it comes time for them to do their hydrant flow testing and make sure their fire suppression systems are good and ready to go, that we can provide those adequate pressures. Because right now we can't.
But this request isn't going through because the Vester project is happening. This is coming up because there is this very extended delay on getting parts.
Yeah, no, whether it was Vester or not, if, we had the ability to obtain material to get work done and not push everything a year, we'd make the same request.
Yeah, and this is coming out of the water fund.
Water and sewer capital.
Not the general fund. So whether we spend the money this year out of that fund, we're going to end up, if we don't, we're going to spend the money next year out of the fund.
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you.
The chair. Did I hear you correctly when you said that there was the potential for the developer for the Vester project to contribute to some of this water main replacement?
Yeah, we haven't finalized what that would look like, but that is discussion points that, city manager's office and CED will be working on as they finalize all the development agreement.
Financing.
Yeah, through the chair, it would be part of, it could be part of a community benefits package that would be considered by council as part of an incentive policy. But ultimately, we would look at their lineal foot, their proportion of the piping. We would want to understand the cost of their development's impact on what we would size for the street. And then we would have more of a specific request that directly related to their proportion of the project, if that makes sense.
Do you have a sense of rough estimate of dollar amount or a range?
I don't at this time.
Okay.
But we've just gotten these updated numbers, and so our civil engineers reviewing that and going to give us a estimate hopefully before the new year.
And then I have two other questions, if I may. Ann, could you give me an estimate of how much cost we incur each time we have a water break on Vester?
It depends if we're able to pinpoint a perfect location, but if you want to just factor in and say every time the city has a water main break, whether it's on Vester or any other street, and it's a traditional water main break that you're bringing out a crew, you're repairing during normal business hours, after you factor in equipment and material and completing the road repair after all said and done, anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000 per occasion. But then that's not factoring in the cost that you could place on residents not having the ability to have access to water for anywhere from 3 on a good end to 8 if we're not having a good time on that water main repair.
And my last question, do we have an estimate of the price differential between this price and what we would expect to see next year? Entity.
So what we did in looking out future years with the pricing that was included with the kind of the project scope of the resolution that issued revenue bonds, we made an assumption that we'd see 5% inflation year over year. We're hoping that that is a conservative number going forward. But this year and the previous year has made it very difficult to make a quality assumption. you know, the one thing that we have been doing in recent years is really looking down and updating our 20-year capital budget. So, for example, when we estimated our, you know, updated budget numbers when we were going through the fiscal year 23 budget cycle, was let's take a look at the numbers that we saw. We'll apply those unit costs to our future projects, develop our cost estimate, tack on inflation, and spread that out over 20 years. And that's what we typically do year over year. If all things kind of hold true and, you know, inflation doesn't kind of return to a normal rate, you know, it may be one of those things where this is something that we actually need to start looking at, you know, every 6 months, once a quarter. Especially for the you know, larger utilities. You know, Glee was in the same boat. This isn't necessarily a Ferndale problem. It's a kind of across the board everyone problem, where, you know, our engineers could sit down, put together quality cost estimates that would typically hold true over a 5-year period with a little bit of variance, which we used to see on those projects that we did in even in 2020, and we bid out for our 2020 work, or 2019 work, or 2018 work. You know, our cost estimates were pretty good on our paving. The past few years, our cost estimates have been very close to what we're seeing in terms of our low bid award coming in. You know, our estimate of costs on our 2023 paving is a bit higher than what we've seen in the past. That's due to just the increase in prices on things across the board. But, you know, with the finance department implementing those quarterly budget adjustments, you know, with us taking a look at what price increases are doing in terms of material, and making sure we're doing our best to update our long-term capital plan appropriately, and maybe just reworking that to doing that a bit more often during the calendar year. I think it, you know, it really benefits us in the long run, you know, especially if we're requesting to spend potentially up to $12 million in bonds to do work. You know, the one thing that we're going to want to do, and, you know, really what we do, even with the our road bond issuance, is every year we're looking, okay, this is what we estimated to spend when we issued the bond. You know, this is what we're tracking. You know, we're tracking on pace that in 2025, you know, we'll be plus or minus $1 million or $2 million. So then we can say, like, okay, let's allocate appropriately within major and local roads capital to offset a potential difference. You know, we'll just be doing the same thing with the water and sewer fund. The only difference is we haven't done this in a while because we've just paid as you go. And we've done a lot of work that way. Now it's just taking a look at our budget, making more adjustments over time, and then just trying to plan out that 5 years from now we're pretty on the money, or, you know, it's looking and saying, okay, let's spread some projects out a little bit. You know, the recommendation would always be, if we have the ability to fund the projects, to do those projects year over year. But knowing that, you know, sometimes it's not the most favorite, your most favorite thing to do, that we just have to delay, because I mean, that is an option that we have. You know, we can perform work, we can not perform work, we can choose to delay work. And those are really the 3 options that we have. So our option is always to try and let's perform this work, and the one unfortunate side of this is it's coming at a contract modification that's a substantial contract modification, versus competitively bidding this out because of some of the known factors that we have in terms of this versus some of the unknowns that come with competitively bidding it out on this go around. So, you know, I'm hoping we can get to a point where we're pretty close to being on the money with our cost estimates. Just this year, whether it's our, you know, equipment we're looking to order, or, you know, looking down at our, you know, next year's construction cost estimates, it's been a very difficult year due to market conditions to budget conservatively and, you know, not extremely over budget, because that's also not appropriate to do in terms of like our ratepayers. So then we're just building up a fund balance that we didn't necessarily need to build up off the backs of, you know, those paying for their water bills.
Thanks, Dan. Is that all your questions? Excellent. All right, we need a motion to proceed, but I've been wanting to say something all night, and I really, to bid or not to be rebid, that is the question. That is really what is on the table tonight. Save money or take some risks. There's pros and cons of each. So we need a motion to proceed.
I move to approve the contract modification to the 2022 Water Main Improvement Program in the estimated amount of $1,053,187.50. The expense to be charged to the Water Sewer Fund Capital Outlay Account Number 592-000-977, following approval of contract documents by the City Attorney, and approve DPW Director to sign contract documents as submitted by DPW Director.
Second.
Moved by Polika and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem James.
Polika.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Leaks May.
Yes.
Mikulski.
No.
Piana.
Yes, with comment. I typically favor rebidding and have supported all rebidding, but under pandemic and recovery of pandemic circumstances, to me, I see the risk of waiting another year, that costs will go up, the pipes won't show up, and Vester Street is at risk, and not wanting to impact businesses. Residents and potential businesses along Vester Street. So that is why I'm in favor this time around, but this is a case-by-case decision that I would make if we ever came across these types of encounters, circumstances again. So that is my statement of my vote tonight. All right. Would anybody else like to explain their vote? Okay. Moving on. It is now called a council. We're at the end. And, oh, sorry, did I have a roll call?
Yes.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Yes, we did. Sorry, I went on talking. Moving on to call the council and handing the reins over to you. Joe.
One moment, Mayor. Through the chair, I'll leave Dan up there to talk about possible snow emergencies. It's just a refresher.
Yeah, so with the current weather forecast that we're seeing right now, we could receive, an accumulation of snowfall Friday into early Saturday morning. It's tough to say how much snow is really going to fall right now, but the one thing to look out for is a snow emergency. Typically, we're calling a snow emergency if we receive 4 more inches of snow. That's going to trigger us to plow every single street in the city, not only our majors, but all of our residential streets. Typically, during a normal snowfall event of, let's say, 2 inches of snow, we're focusing on plowing and salting our major roads like Hilton, Pinecrest, 9 Mile, Woodward, and then some of our fire routes such as Marshall, Camborne, and so on. During that snow emergency, we're plowing everything, we're salting stops, and so on. And depending on the severity, if it's very icy, that would trigger us to then salt every street. There is a number of snow emergency lots in the city of Ferndale. You can get a permit from the police department for those lots. Those lots are the east and west Breckenridge parking lots in the downtown area. Kulik Center, we still will be able to utilize this season as an emergency snow parking lot. Harding Park, Martin Road Park, and Wilson Park are all available for snow emergency parking. If you park in those lots, you can park your car back on the street after we've come through and plowed that street. Those parking lots will remain snow covered for a little bit, but eventually we will get back to those and get those plowed out so you can remove your vehicle. And then, secondly, with the holidays falling on Saturdays and Sundays this year, for both the Christmas holiday and then New Year's, there will be no disruption in curbside waste collection for it. So it's your normal trash day. Put your recycling out, put your garbage out. That will be collected as it normally does. The DPW will be, closed as the rest of the city on Friday and Monday of both weeks. But if snow's flying on Friday, we'll be out plowing and salting streets on Friday. So if anyone has any questions about snow emergencies in general, they can visit the city's website or just give us a call at the DPW.
Thanks, Dan. Next, Chief Emmy on some new officers.
Evening, Mayor and Council. I want to wish everybody a happy holiday season and a happy New Year. Probably won't see each other for a while. Also, wanted to let you know there's 2 more officers that joined our department last week. They were sworn in, Officer Nicholas July and Officer Chris Smilko. Chris Smilko comes to us by the way of the Indianapolis Police Department, where he was a standout officer for 7 years before moving to our area. Officer July, we already have his brother working for us, so it's kind of exciting to have a set of brothers working for the police department. And he's currently enlisted in the Michigan National Guard, and he was an honor graduate at his local police academy, at the Oakland Police Academy, where he graduated as the class leader. So he is a standout already. So we're excited to welcome them aboard. I want to thank the HR department for their help, and it's nice to be at full strength once again. We'll enjoy it while we have it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Our Communications Director, Kara Sokol.
Falling asleep. Good evening, Council. So hot off the press is almost the winter newsletter, freshly proofread today and final edited and off to the printer tomorrow morning. Our communications assistant Riley Coleman did an amazing job on another edition. This will, with the holiday, likely be hitting between the 2nd and 3rd week of January for everybody in their mailboxes. Lots of good information, a lot of stuff about snow parking, snow removal, winter information from DPW, as well as program and event information from Parks and Rec. This will be covering mid-January through mid-April or so. And so we've actually got information already about the extravaganza Easter thing. This thing is coming on so quickly. So I would advise all of our residents to keep a lookout for these coming in a few weeks. And as always, if you have any questions about it, reach out to us in the communications department. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I'll bring us home. Just a reminder to the public that the city observes the holiday on Monday when it's on a Sunday. So city offices at City Hall and Parks and Rec will be closed on Monday the 26th and Monday, January 2nd, as the city officially observes those days. Then also we will be suspending parking enforcement hours during the same days. So on both of those Mondays, parking will be enforced. So come on down. I'd like to wish council, the community, and my staff a happy new year. You've had a tremendous challenge this year. We've seen a lot of change in 2023. I think we're prepared for it, so I appreciate everybody. I want to build on Kara's newsletter comment as an opportunity to also introduce Fern and Learn. You'll read about the city's efforts to launch our first Community 101 program. So we'll be hopefully launching that this spring. And that's it, Council.
Thank you. And I'll bring it back to council members, and I'll start with Councilwoman McCluskey.
Nothing much tonight. I did want to point out to residents that are interested in really rewarding to be part of a commission. There are a number of commission seats open. I know we had environmental sustainability here earlier. There are no positions there. Please do come out. It's very interesting to participate in the commission. But there is a spot on Parks and Rec, 5 spots on the Arts and Cultural Commission, and 3 spots on Accessibility and Inclusion. All are great. There's a ton of energy, a ton of really good ideas. So please, if you'd like to get involved, come on out to the commissions, and you can find information on the ferndalemi.gov website. Also, have a safe and happy holiday.
Right. Heading over here, Councilwoman Leaks May.
Okay, so I just want to give a heartfelt thanks to Charles Hall, who has concluded his, I guess, what am I trying to say? It's been a long night. Well, I want to send thank you to Charles Hall, who was on the Ferndale Accessibility and Inclusion Committee, and he has finished his term and is moved to another location. And I just want to thank his service because he was quite knowledgeable, especially with digital disability information. Very, very knowledgeable. I also want to send a thank you to Michael Steidemann, who was on the Board of Zoning and Appeals, also moved and relocated. So there is another opening on the Board of Zoning and Appeals, as piggyback off of Councilwoman Mikulski's comments. And I also would like to thank everyone. I wish you a very, very safe holiday season, a wonderful new year, and look forward to all the exciting things coming up in 2023. So thank you.
Councilman Paulson.
I just want to wish everybody a happy holiday.
Thank you. I have one announcement. I received an email today this week, or Friday, from Consumers Energy, and they are offering a free Google Nest thermostat. For the first 30,000 customers, they're giving away 30,000 smart thermostats to eligible customers. And you need to be either a gas or a combo customer of Consumers Energy. And priority will be given to customers considered low income, which is 150% of the federal poverty level or below, or vulnerable population as listed by the United Way. These are completely free, and they're doing it as a way to help people save money with their energy bills with the cost of natural gas going up. So you can go to consumersenergy.com/freestat to see if you qualify for the Google Nest thermostat. We do not have a Nest at home, but we do have a electronic device telling us when to turn down our heat and gas, and find it very useful monitoring our energy use. My house is very cold until 7 p.m. when the heat is allowed to